Live from Super Bowl 59 in New Orleans, this is Roy Kessel for Sports Philanthropy Network, and we're very excited to be with us here today with Stan Slovin. Stan has been a friend for a long time and is doing amazing work with an organization called Rebecca's Dream. So, Stan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Roy, for having us, and thank you for Sports Philanthropy Network. We are very glad to be on Radio Row and here out in Louisiana, New Orleans for the Super Bowl.
Well, you guys have had an amazing day walking around talking to people. As you've seen, mental health is really one of the top issues that we hear about constantly from athletes at all levels, youth, high school, college, pro, former pro, and really everywhere in the world these days. Mental health is one of the topics. So, talk to us a little bit about Rebecca's Dream and how you first got involved with it.
Sure. Well, Rebecca's Dream is a 501c3 charity that is geared toward and focused on mental health advocacy. So we are there for awareness, compassion, understanding, people that are living with mental health issues, depression, bipolar, stress, anxiety, even suicide tendencies. And what is happening is like this week and everything, and on Radio Row, the world, okay, is trying to tackle mental health. So we love the fact that all day today, not only is it on the forefront of just like sports in the NFL, but all sports are affected by this. And we're seeing this coming from not just players and coaches and owners, but also trickling down to the universities and to the middle schools. And it's just a big area that we're trying to be a big advocate for awareness and education.
So you've had a long career, long successful career in the finance industry. You've seen a lot of high stress businesses, high stress business owners. Why do you think things have changed so much that mental health has now become on the forefront of all of these topics?
Well, I'll throw a statistic. In the colleges alone, 24,000 athletes a year think about committing suicide. 1,100 actually do. Okay, it is a wake-up call to sports. We saw this in gymnastics. We saw this in figure skating. We've seen this recently in tennis. We're seeing it in all sports across the world, that it's not just a thing that years ago you couldn't talk about it, or, hey, you know what? Get back on the field. You're going to be okay. No, this is a real disease. And what's happening is we're seeing that, from the highest level of not only just the NFL and MLB and all the other different sports, but now the colleges are realizing that we cannot be reactive anymore. We have to be proactive, because it's not a reactive disease. Okay, we can't just hear about it and then do something. We have to get education early on. We need the parents to be talking to the students. We need the parents to be talking to their children, coaches to get more involved, schools to be accepting. It's like we talked about this last year. You hurt your arm, or you injured your knee. You go into that locker room, you get that MRI, that surgery, that recovery, and you're back on the field. There's no door in those locker rooms for mental health. And that's why we're trying to break down the barriers of stigma and bring more awareness so that we get them to have a more proactive, and not just in sports, but that's for everyone that's affected.
I think one of the things that's hardest that we see in mental health is the fact that it's an invisible disease, right? If I tear my ACL, I'm going to be on crutches. I'm going to have surgery. Everybody can see that. You get a lot of sympathy, right? I break my ankle, I'm in a boot, I'm in a cast. When I'm dealing with a mental health crisis, it's really hard. Nobody looking around the room can just snap their fingers and go, "Oh, I see Stan's got a mental health crisis
Right.
going on."
Yeah. So this is the challenge, and this is where the mental health advocates are trying to raise the awareness, and that is, where are the signs? Okay, are there screenings that we can do? Is there mental health first aid? Can the teachers be more aware so they can get the social workers involved? Can the coaches be more aware so that these athletes that come to the field and say, it's not a good day for me, and so like, you know what? Why? So being a better listener, asking the right questions, opening up the dialogue, having a more meaningful discussion. This is where mental health is moving toward. And we're seeing that in the proactiveness of our communities, our schools, our athletic departments, and now we go into the universities and now into the pro teams.
I think one of the things that I've heard from people that's really a challenge is this two-sided tension because if I'm an athlete, I may not want my coach to know what I'm going through because you may hold it against me, either intentionally or just inadvertently, that like it's just human nature. Like, hey, I need players that I can rely on. If somebody's struggling, okay, I'm sorry, I want to help you, but at the same time, I need to win games, right? I
Yeah.
might care about you as a person, but I need to win games. And so you've got this tension of if I don't want anybody to know and I hide behind sort of the HIPAA regulations and some of the other privacy requirements, how can I open up and let Stan, my coach, help me because Roy's suffering. I'm going through something. You don't know exactly what. You might just see my performance degrade, but you don't really understand what's going on. And you might ask me, but I may not be able to articulate it, or I may not be comfortable sharing it with you. And yet, if I go and see a mental health professional, how do you help? How do you intervene? How do you support me?
Yeah. So I think it's on a lot of different levels. And I think, you raise a really interesting, and that is years ago, it was embarrassing to talk about if I had a mental health issue, or I can't talk about that because no one's going to believe me and no one's going to accept that, or I may not make it into, a high school or a college team or even an NFL team or any sports team if I tell someone that there's a problem with me, or I may not even be aware of that. So I think now what happens is that, with all the rules and the regulations and the legislations, we're coming together realizing that this is not invisible anymore. You mentioned that earlier today. It's not invisible. It is real. And the reason, so you see a Dak Prescott and A.J. Brown, you see all these athletes coming out and talking about this. You see Michael Phelps coming out, an Olympian from swimming, and saying, hey, I have mental health issues. I need help. You see Simone Biles, saying, I'm not going to perform in the Olympics in the US. And you know what? It's because my mental health is not there. So there's a cry out, but there's also a leadership saying that, hey, we need more figures like that in the sports world to come out. And that's going to then trickle down so that it becomes an eye opener. Last thing, we have to start early. We got to really reach down into the communities and have parents, start identifying signs early on, and having teachers identify signs early on, and that having coaches identify signs early on, and have music orchestra leaders, when they have their band players, it has to identify and be an education that it's okay to not be okay. And that's where we're going toward.
And I think that okay not to be okay is really one of the hardest parts, because nobody is perfect, right? Nobody's life is perfect. Everybody goes through difficulties and trauma at different stages of their life, different degrees, some people more serious than others. But I think one of the things we've accepted, that we need physical care. We've accepted that we need to go to a doctor. We don't take it as a character defect if I find out that I have cancer, or if I have diabetes or something. Like, it's not a character flaw. But for some reason, mental health has always been treated differently.
Well, that's the stigma. And that's the exact stigma. But yet there is help out there, and there's treatment out there, and there's counseling out there. So there's different forms. So you mentioned some of those other illnesses, that maybe have a more physical, a perception. But mental health has perceptions of health workers and social workers and doctors and treatments and counseling. And those are all medical. Those are all medical, and they're being accepted. And they're also not being shunned and not being put underneath the carpet. They're like, hey, bring this up. Let's tackle this thing. Let's talk about this, so that if a person is suffering from that disease, as opposed to those other diseases you mentioned, it's okay to now be proactive. And you know what? We're going to help them. So that's why companies, that's why schools, that's why the sports world right now. So NFL, for example, has a mental health program out there. It's just starting. So Roy, I agree with you. We are on the cutting edge, but we're at least talking about it. You mentioned this. Almost every athlete today on Radio Row has come and talked to you, and many of them has raised mental health as a major area. It is on the minds of people, and we're going to hopefully one at a time continue to do our best.
Stan, thanks for coming on with us. Keep up the amazing work with Rebecca's Dream. We're excited to have you involved with Sports Philanthropy World Conference, June 26th and 27th in Chicago. We know that you're going to be a big part of that event, and so thank you for making the time.
And thank you for making mental health a major part of today. Thank you.
For all of our viewers and listeners, this is Roy Kessel signing off for Sports Philanthropy Network, live from Radio Row at Super Bowl 59 in New Orleans. Please remember to live generously.